Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up. Following the demise of Roe v Wade in the US, French President Emmanuel Macron promises to enshrine a woman's right to an abortion in the nation's constitution by next year. Also, how black women in the States are becoming a growth market in the sale of guns. And it's time to rethink evolution, especially from a feminist perspective. I'll be talking shortly to Kat Bohannon about her book, aptly entitled Eve, How the Female Body Drove 200 Million Years of Evolution. But first, and abortion in France was decriminalised in 1975, but there is nothing in the country's constitution that guarantees these rights. With the rollback of Roe v Wade in the US after the Supreme Court overturned a 50-year-old ruling last year, France has now moved to legally protect the nation's abortion laws. President Emmanuel Macron promising to do so by next year, as Catherine Kedder-Clifford reports.
A promise to soon enshrine abortion within the French constitution from President Emmanuel Macron.
In 2024, women's freedom to access abortion will be irreversible.
Amending the constitution can be a laborious process. To sidestep a referendum, Macron chose a government-presented bill to be approved by a special congress of both houses in Versailles. It must be adopted by a 3/5 majority, which appears doable.
The referendum is always risky. There's always the chance of being told no by principle, even though it shouldn't be overestimated. On the other hand, the referendum can also be problematic because it gives a voice to the opposition.
Macron is responding to high demand from rights groups and feminists to guarantee abortion and safeguard it. They report new tactics from emerging anti-abortion groups.
We've seen these new anti-abortion movements appear with new techniques, such as putting stickers on city bikes, street tagging, and they're increasingly mobilizing French politicians.
Within the EU, access to abortion varies. In Poland and Malta, the woman's life must be in danger for the procedure to be granted. Elsewhere, particularly in Romania and Italy, this right is endangered by doctors who make moral objections. In France, the text will be presented to the Council of Ministers before the end of this year. Engraving abortion into the Constitution would mark a first within the EU.
And America is still reeling from yet another mass shooting in Maine, where a gunman killed 18 people and injured 13 others during a shooting spree. Yet, when you think of a gun owner in the US, what most likely springs to mind is a rural, white, conservative man. But in fact, a growing number of African-American women are now purchasing guns, as Emerald Maxwell reports.
It's not your typical girly get-together. This group of women meet up twice a month at this ladies-only gun club in Baltimore.
Tonight we're actually having girls' night out where we come out to pretty much hang out, politic about firearms and firearm safety, and then shoot off a couple rounds to release some stress.
For these women, learning to shoot is fun and empowering, but also a question of self-defense.
It definitely makes me feel more secure so that, I'm 5 foot tall. So if someone did approach me, that I have something to give myself a fighting chance. Hi, ladies. Hi.
Firearms sales to women surged in 2020 when crime soared in many US cities amid the uncertainty of the pandemic.
I have a P365.
The firearms instructor who runs this gun club in Baltimore says it provides a safe space for women who often have different concerns than men about owning a gun.
Unfortunately, the world's getting a little bit crazy, and so I think it's important for women to be able to defend themselves, especially women. Carrying a gun for a woman is very different than for a man. We're usually the ones taking care of the children, so how do I know if something were to happen, how do I make sure my children are safe? How do I store my guns in a way that makes sure my children don't have access to them? So those are different concerns that women have.
Pew Research Center says the share of gun owners among American women has more than doubled over the past 10 years, from 12 to 25%. While the share of men who own firearms rose only slightly, from 37 to 40%. Overall, Americans are split over whether gun ownership does more to increase or decrease safety.
We've heard it often on this show before about how science consistently underserves women with its appalling lack of data about the female body. Now, if you take a look at the journey of the evolution of our species with an intentional feminist perspective, as author Kat Bohannon did, and what you discover is that it was women who led the development of language and also walking on two legs. 10 years of hard work has resulted in this fantastic book, Eve, How the Female Body Drove Evolution. And I'm delighted to say Kat now joins me from Seattle. Kat, thank you so much for your time. I take it was pure, utter frustration about the lack of data in regards to the female body that drove you to write this book.
Absolutely. When it comes to basic science in mammals, all the way down to the terrible things we do to rats, but for the good of all, or all the way back up to human clinical trials, all females are understudied and undercared for. And it's really time for that to change. So I knew that we needed a book about where we come from.
And again, the assumption that women's bodies are just men's bodies with a few additional extras.
Yeah, I don't know if in France you have a Mr. Potato Head, where you have a doll and you can hot swap out parts like ears and tongues. Well, that's how we've been treating sexed bodies, as if ovaries and gonads of other sorts are hot swappable. But they're not, actually. They're not. Your liver does not have a gender, but it does have a sex. It metabolizes different drugs differently, and we're only just starting to learn out that's true.
Kat, just tell us a little bit more about the differences that you did discover in the course of research for the book.
For example, the liver, okay? Seems like an innocuous organ. It's actually taking up a huge portion of your torso. It's also where you're metabolizing a number of different prescription drugs, okay? Opioids most famously. And when they get metabolized through the liver, they then distribute out into the bloodstream. Well, it turns out that things like opioid drugs are processed differently in female typical livers than they are in male typical livers. In fact, thousands of different genes are differently expressed in female liver cells, the hepatocytes, than they are in the male. And that's probably why female patients tend to need a bit more of opioid drugs to achieve the same amount of pain relief. And then how it leaves our system, both the side effects and the drug itself, again, have a slightly different slope. If we had known that before we put some of these drugs on the market, that would have been a good thing. But unfortunately, because we weren't studying females, we didn't know. We simply found out after the fact.
And let's talk about the women's superpowers that you have also written about. Women tend to have better hearing and at higher frequencies than men, or our ability to outperform men in endurance sports, or that 12% of girls, am I correct in saying this, are born with the physiology to see something like 99 more distinct colours than the average human.
99 million more.
No, I'm sorry, 99 million.
Yeah, it's actually that crazy. You wouldn't think that. That's probably why you made the mistake. But yes, they're called tetrachromats. Because the opsins, which let us see color in our retinas, in our eyes, are X-linked, right? So if you have two X chromosomes, then you actually end up with far more fine differences, or at least you have the potential to do so. Human girls, about a certain percentage of us, are able to see the world a bit more like birds. But we never actually notice that we do, because the mind is trained to follow the world as it's presented to us. And because the majority of people are not tetrachromats, we simply never train ourselves to see it. As for the hearing, it's a very cool thing. Unfortunately, most human cis men start losing their hearing around age 25. Sorry, guys. Actually, it starts cutting off almost like a band filter, the top end of the hearing at this predictable slope that just keeps going on. You don't really need a hearing aid until you're later on in life. But the thing is that means that you're not hearing the upper range of women's voices, right? Because we have higher pitched voices throughout our lifespan.
But of course, the most fascinating part of your book is how the industrialised world is reshaping women's bodies, such as the rise of C-sections, and not to mention, of course, the role of midwives in ensuring the survival of our species.
Absolutely. Although the midwife thing starts way sooner than anything like the Industrial Revolution. It actually starts way sooner than agriculture. So midwives start 3.2 million years ago with Lucy, the Australopithecine, little furry chick living way back when in Africa. Okay. She had the same difficulty giving birth, essentially, that we do, trying to get a watermelon-sized thing out of a lemon-sized hole. And if you've met fruit, it's a problem, right? So that means that she needed help giving birth, much like we do. So midwifery and gynecology in general starts 3.2 million years ago and is very much why the hominin line succeeds at all.
Yet we are still lagging way behind in medical and scientific research on the female body, and we saw that, didn't we, with COVID. So do governments need to legislate in order to ensure that women and girls are included in any key research?
Absolutely. The trick that you may not know is that in most countries, the government isn't necessarily the one in charge of what goes down in scientific research. There are large funding bodies that give grants to scientists that determine what you can and can't do in a lab, but they don't control all the research. A lot of it's in private hands with pharmaceutical R&D, for example. No, the real gatekeepers actually are the editors of scientific journals, the peer-reviewed journals. They're the ones, journal by journal, that determine whether or not they're going to publish these studies that then proliferate out in the scientific field and form the basis for more knowledge. They're the ones that really have to become the gatekeepers and say, no, you must include females. In any given species, you must include females to publish here.
Kat Bohannon, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And that's it for this edition. We'd love to hear your suggestions for the 51%, so do get in touch via Facebook, Instagram and X, formerly known, of course, as Twitter. And you can catch our previous episodes on our website. So until our next show, bye for now.